At 7:43 p.m., my daughter-in-law raised a crystal flute and promised her followers I'd be out of my own house by Monday. At 7:44, I lifted my lemonade and pressed play. At 7:45, the city inspectors walked through the front door while everyone was still smiling for the camera. Bass fell through the floorboards like a dropped plate. Someone's laugh cut in half and lay there twitching. My son's face went the color of skim milk, and the DJ touched his headphones, as if he could rewind the moment before rules existed. That scene lives in the middle of this story. People will tell you revenge is a flash. I learned it is also a ledger, a binder clip, a stamped form, and a door that closes with a new key. To understand how a 67-year-old woman interrupted her own eviction party with a government video about fire codes, you have to hear about patience, and how my son asked for it until the word thinned into something see-through. My name is Ruth Hargrove, and I am 67. I know my age because last month's candles are still fused together in the junk drawer like a tiny orange picket fence. I live in a cedar-scented bungalow on Fairview Lane. Walter, my husband of 41 years, laid the porch boards with the kind of care that leaves no creak if you step where he meant you to. He planted lilacs along the east fence because he said lilacs forgive bad pruning. He died 3 years ago on a blue sky morning with a half-finished birdhouse on the workbench and a radio recipe for cornbread, still clipped to the fridge. The birdhouse got finished. The cornbread clip stayed. Grief is what you leave up because taking it down would be louder than the quiet. Our son, Evan, learned to walk on the kitchen tile that still shows the scratch from the day he dragged a chair to reach the cookie jar. His growth is penciled in uneven marks on the pantry door frame. The inches don't line up right because he stood on his toes when he thought I wasn't looking. I was always looking. Mothers are a kind of archive. When Evan brought Brielle home for dinner, she smelled like expensive vanilla and the inside of new handbags. Events planner, she said, handing me a blush pink card with a gold foil bee that could have been a butterfly or a brand. She praised my porch light, vintage glow, and stroked the piano as if it were a cat that might climb into her lap if she used the right voice. This house photographs beautifully, she said, like a compliment to me and a promise to herself. They moved in after Walter died because I asked. That is important. I thought the house wanted footsteps. I thought I wanted to hear the water run when it wasn't for tea. Brielle hugged me lightly, careful not to wrinkle. Win-win, she said. We'll help you. Save up. 2 months, 3 tops. Then a loft. We'll get you somewhere quieter. She said quieter, the way people say safer when they intend to take your keys. The first party was actually charming. 6 friends, sugar cookies in the shape of peonies, a neon script that read better with bubbles. I poured lemonade. We took a photo, Brielle in front, me to the side holding a tray like a magician's assistant. The house looked younger in the tags. Filters are moisturizer for wood. By the third party, the neon said Saturdays are for the story. The lemonade pitcher sat shoved behind a tub of canned cocktails. A winged eyeliner demonstration appeared on my bathroom mirror, drawn with liquid liner that stained the glass a faint fossil of glamour. The DJ set a ring light on my piano and left a halo burned into the lacquer. Content is queen, Brielle said softly, as if I would not recognize monarchy when it appeared in my living room. The bass crawled into my pillow. People toured my hallway as if the family photographs were interactive art. Twice, strangers opened my bedroom door mid-sentence. Once, a woman draped herself across Walter's armchair, lazily tapping her heel against the worn arm as if ruining a groove were a kind of massage. She captioned her photo, Grandma Core. I learned not to read captions. I tried rules. I printed the city's quiet hours, highlighted the passage in earnest yellow, and stuck it to the fridge. I bought a little digital decibel meter, the kind that looks like a patient robot with a red foam nose. 78, 83, 92, I stood at 10 p.m. and rang a handbell I'd found in the Christmas box. Brielle laughed the way you laugh at a toddler paying bills with crayons. We're almost done, Ruth, she sang. Be patient. Be patient, Evan echoed later, sliding his hands into his hoodie pocket the way boys do when they hope homework disappears if their knuckles press enough. 3 months tops. She's on the cusp. You always told me to support my partner. I had told him that. I believe in teams. I also believe a home is not an airport lounge. Patience, I said carefully, is not permission. He kissed my temple like you kiss a weathered rail on a bridge and said it again. Be patient. The parties multiplied like dandelions after a wet week, bright, hard to uproot, cheerfully illegal in a way that makes neighbors tired. A surprise engagement, confetti cannons coughing paper bits that caught in the baseboards like glitter dandruff. A modern picnic sprawled across my front lawn, velvet poofs that left dents in the grass, and a grazing board so long at its own zip code. A brand collaboration, their words, not the city's, involving 3 ice buckets, 2 cases of a sparkling beverage I did not recognize, and a photographer who took a video of my hands cutting lemons and captioned them aesthetic. I moved my wedding photo off the mantle because someone kept picking it up and saying, cute. The near disaster came with candles. Brielle wanted warmth, which is a nice word for fire. She placed 20 tea lights in glass cups along the stairway and sprinkled faux rose petals that turned out to be real tissue paper dyed to look alive. At 10:13 p.m., someone spilling a flute knocked a candle under the runner. At 10:14, the tissue smoldered. At 10:15, I smothered the spot with a damp towel while 2 influencers filmed themselves shouting, chaotic, at the flicker. That was the first time I said no out loud. Not in my house. Brielle hugged me hard, too hard, and whispered, the drama performs so well. Be patient. People were performing in my pantry. That's how far it had gone. I built a binder. It was the color of pale dawn because the office store had run out of navy and because I liked the way dawn sounds even when it's a sheet of plastic and 3 metal rings. Inside I put the quiet hours law, printed emails, screenshots of flyers, copies of texts that said things like 9 p.m. and replies that said LOL. I added a page labeled decibel and wrote down numbers with dates like a scientist studying a volcano polite enough to announce itself. I called senior legal aid because the magnet with their number had been hiding under a pizza coupon since last winter. This is Ms. Malik, said a voice with a patient river in it. I told her about my decibel robot and the ring light burn and the party called Saturdays are for the story. I told her my son said patience as if it were medicine. She asked who held the deed. I do, I said, and my throat warmed like I'd swallowed tea. Good, she said. Let's start with boundaries, documentation, and title protection. Do you trust anyone near you? I trusted 3. Mr. Alvarez next door, who grew tomatoes that tasted like sunshine and gave me the ugly ones because he said the ugly ones always held the sweetest seeds. Tasha across the street, who ran a PTA like a symphony and could get a budget approved with a look. Mrs. Becker at the corner, who had lived through a house fire, 2 remodels, and a decade of tenants from a landlord who loved granite and never fixed the pipes. Mrs. Becker saved receipts like living things. We met around my table, my binder open like an organ. I poured store-bought cookies onto a plate and apologized for their perfection. Tasha pulled a thicker binder from her tote. Noise ordinance, she said. Occupancy limits. Residential versus commercial use. If it's once a month for a birthday, that's one thing. She's selling experiences out of your living room. She had color tabs. All the right tabs. We've been calling non-emergency, Mrs. Becker admitted, but the officers just warn them and leave. Then it starts up again. I can't hear my TV at a normal volume. My cat lives under my bed. Mr. Alvarez tapped the edge of my binder. Tell us how to help, Ruth, he said softly. We'll be patient together. It landed differently in my chest when he said it. Not a command. A resource. Patience can be a thing you lift together. Ms. Malik laid out a plan like you lay out ingredients before you cook. Post clear written house rules. Send all communication in writing, no more hallway negotiations that evaporate like steam. Terminate in writing any license to use your property for commercial events. Document everything, dates, estimated head counts, brand signage, tipping jars, Venmo codes taped to the front hall table with clever hashtags. Make contemporaneous notes, she said, the way doctors write in charts. Most importantly, she added, we protect the title. We'll put the house into a revocable trust with you as trustee and record a life estate deed. That way no one can pressure you to transition by waving a realtor in your kitchen. Do not discuss the trust with them. Record it. We will keep attorneys and judges in our back pocket for later. Do I have to evict my own son? I asked. The word felt like a trap. Evict. Who am I exactly? You might not have to, she said. But if we need to, we'll be careful and lawful. Let the city handle the parties first. They love fire codes more than you love lemon bars. I posted the rules the next morning. Quiet hours. No commercial events. 8 guests max unless approved in writing. Do not move instruments or family photos. Violations may terminate your permission to use the premises. I signed my name at the bottom with the same hand that used to sign permission slips for field trips. Brielle read it like a cute menu. She took a picture for her story with 3 laughing emojis. Boundary Queen, someone wrote. I wiped the printout with a cloth because a sticky fingerprint on Rule 2 felt symbolic. She doubled down. A shipment of branded glassware arrived and lived on my dining table for a week, little flutes etched with a hashtag and the silhouette of a bungalow that looked suspiciously like mine. She taped a QR code by the door for donations. She purchased a neon sign that said farewell to Fairview in a cursive that looked sentimental until you noticed the RSVP link printed below. Farewell to where? I asked. Our soft goodbye, she said. Before we move to the loft. Before we help you list this little place. The realtor says bungalows are fire right now. She patted the banister. It felt like someone petting a pony right before they sell it. This little place, I said. I'm not moving. When you say no clearly the first time, you hear how many times you have swallowed it. She pursed her mouth. It's not safe for you to manage a property alone. And Evan and I, well, we're starting a family. We need space. You have space, I said, quietly because loud can be mistaken for confusion. You are living in it. Then be patient, she said. We'll help you transition. I made tea so the house could hear something boiling that wasn't rage. I called the recorder's office. MS. Malik emailed PDFs with blue stamps and tidy blanks. On Friday morning, I put on Walter's flannel-lined jacket because the recorder's office is always cold. Mrs. Becker came as my witness. We recorded the trust and the life estate deed. The clerk slid them back to me smelling like toner and permanence. I slipped everything into the Dawn binder, took a photo, and quietly put the binder in the piano bench where Walter used to hide birthday cards and the crossword he couldn't finish. Saturday arrived with air bright enough to make strangers take pictures of leaves. At noon, a rental truck disgorged speakers tall enough to lean a person on. Men in branded shirts carried in crates that said fragile in a font that might as well have said look at me. Brielle floated in a satin robe the color of melted champagne. She air-kissed a florist who kept saying ethereal as he wired eucalyptus to my staircase like it had always intended to be in a Pinterest. Ruth, she sang, we have a surprise for you tonight. Her tone suggested jewelry. I hope it involves everyone leaving by 9, I said. She laughed as if I'd said I hoped to sprout wings. By 5, the house throbbed. Strangers trailed along my bookshelves with their fingertips like reading Braille. Someone set a sweating champagne bottle on the piano, and it left a soft circle. I wiped it with the edge of my sleeve out of habit, the way you brush crumbs from a sleeping child. Brielle's assistant taped a donation sign over my antique mirror with cute arrows pointing to the QR code. If you roll a law into calligraphy, it is still a law. At 7:30, Brielle tapped a fork against glass. The rented canopy lights glowed like bless you. Friends, she said, standing under farewell to Fairview with arms wide, to new beginnings. On Monday, we help Ruth transition to a place better for her, somewhere quiet. Tonight, we give this house the send-off it deserves. My heart didn't break. It clicked, like a lock when the right key turns. I set down the ladle, wiped my palms on my skirt, and went to the living room. Evan stood near the mantel. He had the posture of a man holding a compromise like a sandcastle. When he saw me, his hand dropped. Before the toast, I said, and there's a tone women my age inherit. They use it when they quiet a room without raising their voice. A short video. Ruth, Brielle said out of the side of her smile. Later. It's about fire codes, I said. Someone snorted. Fine. I picked up the remote. Evan had labeled the inputs for me a month after Walter died. HDMI 1, cable. HDMI 2, DVD. HDMI 3, piano. Piano was the laptop cable he'd snaked through the back of the cabinet. I selected piano. The screen filled with a pre-recorded message from the city's code compliance office. Ms. Malik had helped me request it. It was bland in the way official things are bland when they intend to be taken seriously. The man on screen explained maximum occupancy for single-family dwellings, the difference between a private party and an unpermitted commercial event, and the fire safety hazards common to hosted experiences, which is a kind phrase for selling tickets to a vibe in a living room. He read a sentence that contained my address. No permit has been issued for event activity at 214 Fairview Lane. Hum falls differently when a room realizes it is being watched. The laughter shrank. Someone's ice clinked loud. I opened the front door. 2 inspectors stood on my porch in navy windbreakers. Behind them, an officer in a neatly ironed uniform shifted his weight politely so his utility belt wouldn't nick my geraniums. On the sidewalk, Mr. Alvarez folded his arms, tomato steak in his back pocket like a short baton. Tasha held a clipboard. Mrs. Becker stood with a paper grocery bag full of receipts. Good evening, the lead inspector said, stepping inside like the house might bite him. We've received multiple complaints about an unpermitted commercial event. His eyes took in the speaker towers, the neon, the cash box, the QR code, the flower wall. He noticed the obstructed hallway where crates had been stacked for visual interest, blocking the back exit. He saw the ring light carving a white circle into my piano. We're just having friends, Brielle said brightly, recovering like an athlete who trips and turns it into a jump. It's a private gathering. Ruth loves these. I do not, I said, not loud, not mean. True. Ma'am, the inspector said, looking at me like a person, do you want these guests to leave? Yes. My voice did not shake. I have learned that shaking is not a requirement for power. The officer asked the DJ to turn it off. He did, hands trembling like he had never been quiet in his life. The inspector began counting heads and pointing toward the door with the calm of a dentist. The guests left the way stage props leave sideways. Someone patted my arm in apology. Another person slipped a branded cocktail stirrer into her purse. The house exhaled. Brielle, I said. Evan. Check your email. At 7:45, a message went to both their inboxes. Effective immediately, your license to use my home for events is terminated. It summarized the house rules, listed prior warnings, and attached scans of the trust and the life estate deed with the recorder's blue stamps like tiny oceans. I had signed with the pen Walter used for our anniversary cards. I included a line that read, all further communication must be in writing. Brielle blinked like a person adjusting to a theater's lights after a matinee. You can't do this, she said. We live here. You occupy rooms, I said gently. Living is different. The inspectors issued citations. Unpermitted event, noise beyond posted hours, fire egress obstruction. The officer left his card with a note on the back. Call if you need a civil standby. Outside, someone filmed our porch and typed drama, but the clip didn't go viral. Quiet rarely does, until it does. Afterward, the house smelled like lemon cleaner and tin. Brielle stood in the living room studying me like I was an angle to shoot from. This is a misunderstanding, she said. You'll apologize tomorrow. In the morning, I said, I will make coffee at 6. At 7, the rental company will pick up their props. At 9, a locksmith will change the locks. At noon, my neighbors, who have been breathing confetti, will eat sandwiches at my table. At 2, I will nap. By Friday, you and my son will have found a new place. We can't move that fast, she said. Be reasonable. I am, I said. Calm has a taste when you have not had it for a while. You gave me 3 months of Sundays where I ate dinner in my car. Evan stared. You what? When this room turned into a bar, I said, I took my sandwich to the park and ate it in the front seat like a teenager hiding a bad grade. Patience has a cost. I've been paying. Brielle scoffed gently. You wouldn't call the police on your family. I didn't, I said. I called the city. The week after the party was a storm where I stood, somehow, in the dry part. The rental company took back their scenery. The locksmith replaced keys and drew the new code on a card in patient block letters. The neighbors came with potato salads and apologies for their own patience. We raised glasses filled with iced tea and a kind of shared relief people don't toast because it doesn't sparkle. Brielle did not pack to leave. She packed to negotiate. Boxes labeled brands and props lived in my hallway like squatters. My teacups appeared inside one, and I took them out without a speech. She scheduled 2 apartment showings and canceled both. She posted a long caption about generational gatekeeping that used the word elder like a costume. Her followers argued in comments while my house read a book. On Thursday, I found that the battery had been removed from 2 smoke detectors and the carbon monoxide monitor had been unplugged. The beeping bothered my videos, Brielle said. I replaced the batteries and wrote, "Tampering with safety devices is grounds for immediate removal" on a sticky note, which I stuck to the beeping detector like a blessing. That afternoon, a letter arrived from my insurance company confirming a phone call Ms. Malik had told me to make. It said that ongoing event activity would increase my risk profile and could result in non-renewal. I laid it on the hall table. Brielle skimmed it and laughed without humor. "You're dramatic," she said. Like a streaming show. On Friday at 9:01, she announced that they weren't leaving. "We've consulted someone," she said, meaning a friend's cousin who once passed a real estate exam. "We have tenant rights." "You have a license at will," I said, opening the Dawn binder. "Revoked." I filled the date on a notice to quit and set it on a floral tray as if it were cake. "If you remain, I will file an unlawful detainer. There will be a hearing. You will lose. The sheriff will schedule a lockout. I will ask for costs." "Ruth," Evan said, and my name in his mouth sounded like a glass he was afraid to drop. "Be patient with me," I told him, and the plea tasted nothing like surrender. They stayed through the weekend because momentum is a habit. Sunday night, I found a note on my pillow in Brielle's precise hand. "We can fix this if you undo everything." I slid a smaller note underneath in my workman's block letters. "I have undone nothing, and I have lost less than you think." Monday, I filed. Ms. Malik met me at the courthouse with fluorescent post-its and legal breath mints. We slid paperwork under glass and collected hearing dates the way you collect library holds. 2 Wednesdays away. I pinned the slip to the corkboard above the kitchen phone with the list of bulbs to plant in October. The day before the hearing, Evan knocked. He held a box with our family photos and a plastic bag with shirts. "I'm going to stay with a friend," he said, eyes fixed on his shoes. "Just for a bit. Brielle wants to fight." "I don't." I let him in. He set the box on the piano bench. He looked around like a museum visitor. "Do you hate me?" he asked, and his voice shrank to 7 years old and a crushed hydrangea. "I do not," I said. "I have been furious with you. I have mourned you in your own house. Both can be true." I touched the arm he broke falling out of the maple tree in 5th grade. "You can be my son and be wrong. And you can change." "I'm sorry," he said. It was not absolution. It was a hinge. Court was not a drama. It was a line at the DMV with extra chairs. Brielle wore a suit the color of new money and brought a friend who gasped when the judge mispronounced her name. I brought Ms. Malik and Mrs. Becker in her church dress. The judge asked crisp questions. "Who holds title?" "Me." "Is there a lease?" "No." "Have rules been set and ignored?" "Yes." "Commercial events?" The inspector's citations and the screenshots answered that question better than Brielle's paragraph about community building content. "Life estate deed recorded?" The blue stamp spoke. We won. The ruling was not a monologue, it was a finger pointing toward the door. The sheriff never came. The keys lay on the table the next morning under a note that said "Enjoy the quiet" in Brielle's decorative hand. Evan's key was beside it, scratched like a history. The house inhaled. I washed sheets, opened windows, oiled the piano. I simmered chicken soup in the pot Walter's mother had given us with a note that read, "For feeding people you love." I cried into the steam and then laughed because the salt might help, then cried at the thought of wasting the salt. I threw my own party a week later, but I called it tea. I handwrote "Tea at Ruth's" on 3 index cards and slid them under the neighbors' doormats. Tasha arrived with soft music and an apology for not pushing sooner. "Mr. Alvarez came with tomatoes and said, "For the general." I am not a general, but it felt like someone laid a shawl on my shoulders. Mrs. Becker brought a pamphlet of neighborhood history and read a paragraph about Walter building the porch. We stood on the boards and felt them hold. Evan texted, "Can I stop by?" He arrived alone, looked 10 years older and 5 pounds lighter. Just for now, he said about the spare room over the hardware store where he was living. "I'll help fix the pantry frame." "Leave it," I said. "The scuffs tell a true story." We talked until the light thinned. He apologized in the clumsy way that opens the door to the real apology, then he found it. We made small, specific plans. Saturdays, he'd weed. Wednesdays, I'd bring soup. He'd knock. I'd not narrate where the rate goes. We signed our names to those promises like a contract no judge could enforce and every mother could. 2 months later, Brielle appeared with a box of books, not props. Her lipstick was a shade softer, as if she'd turned down the volume there too. "I didn't think you'd actually do it," she said. That was not an apology. Then she said, "You made me look bad." That was not either. "You made yourself look busy at my expense," I said. "Those are different." She looked past me into the living room and said in a rush, "I grew up with not much. When I got attention, it felt like safety." "I'm not a spotlight," I told her. "I'm a person with a porch." We stood like that until she said, "I'm sorry," short and unadorned. It didn't fix the wood or the confidence. It did something smaller and therefore more real. "I won't come back unless you ask." "Thank you," I said. I didn't ask. Life rearranged itself. I learned the boards that creak before the kettle sings. I planted bulbs, daffodils for Walter, tulips for my mother, grape hyacinths for laughter my porch now deserved. I joined Tasha at a city meeting called Quiet Streets, where a man in a tie said they were considering clearer guidelines for home-based experiences, and 2 bakers asked whether cupcake pop-ups counted. A woman in the back whispered, "Patients can have paperwork," and I almost turned to hug her. Evan showed up on rainy mornings with a toolbox and a habit of knocking. He fixed the pantry hinge. He traced the pencil marks that measured him growing. "I stood on my toes," he said. "Dad knew." "You knew?" "I knew," I said. "And now you know I knew." He laughed. He asked to borrow the decibel meter because his neighbor plays trumpet. I let him take it on the condition that he use it with kindness. Something small changed in me about the word revenge. People imagine it as a flame. For me it was a sequence, saying no with a binder, then with a video, then with a locksmith, then with a judge. It was watching my son walk back toward himself. It was the taste of tea in a house that hums with refrigerator and weather. If you want the unglamorous details here. I kept a log like a nurse. Date, start time, peak decibels, approximate head count, 20 plus in sequins, notes about the QR code taped by the door with suggested donation $15, written in a font that looked like a friend. I took photos of the obstructed hallway and emailed them to myself with subject lines like "Hallway blocked 11:07 p.m. I wrote to Brielle, never at Brielle, and ended each email with "Please confirm" in writing. I printed everything and hole-punched it to the rhythm of a heartbeat. I reached out to the code compliance office not to weaponize them but to inform them. I wrote, "I am an owner-occupant with a question about repeated events." I asked about the difference between private and commercial. I asked whether a QR code is money. They sent me to the ordinance. I followed it like a recipe. When I requested the video, I did it through the public information officer. "Would you be willing to record a short informational segment about residential safety I can show at a community meeting?" I asked. It was both a community meeting and a living room. I never lied. I arranged for inspectors not as an ambush but as a safety check. I had the house read the truth out loud. I wrote a will adjustment. I named my house in a trust so that if anyone tried to love me into a listing I could smile and point to the stamp that said "I'm not for sale yet." That is what you do when your patience is real, you back it with ink. Brielle tried small tricks on her way out. She listed my address on 2 platforms that sell charming residential sets. I sent polite takedowns with the trust's language and the citations attached. She posted a story with the word "betrayal." I answered with nothing, which is also a word. She told an aunt I was unstable. I invited the aunt over for tea and sent her home with soup and a photocopy of the life estate deed with the blue stamp circled in pencil. She wrote back, "Oh. Sometimes O is the most you get from a person and the most you need." For weeks after the party, I kept waking at 2:12 a.m., certain the bass would start. It didn't. Silence is not an absence. It is a presence that takes practice to hear again. I sat in the living room and listened to the heater tick, the rain shoulder the window, the house breathe around me like a big cat settling. One Saturday, Evan came with bagels and a friend named Mira. He said friend in the careful way people do when they are not ready to label a thing you can break by pointing. She wore old jeans and helped carry lumber like she had trained in carrying heavier things privately. We built planter boxes. Evan measured. Mira double-checked. I held the level and kept my mouth closed about how Walter taught me to do it. That is what patience looks like from the other side, not correcting when someone else's way is good enough. We found under the porch a box labeled Christmas, lights, old in Walter's handwriting. We opened it to find a tangle of wires and a note that said, "Don't untangle these unless you have time." We laughed and closed the box. I made a new note. Some knots don't need your fingers. 3 months after the court date, a letter arrived addressed to me from the city. It thanked me for bringing attention to unpermitted residential event activity and invited me to sit on a committee with a fancy name that meant neighbors who read ordinances. I said yes if they would serve coffee and let me bring lemon bars. They said yes. Ms. Malik came to the first meeting wearing sneakers and joy. We wrote language plain enough for people like me to understand and firm enough for people like Brielle to respect. Brielle turned her energy. I watched from a distance the way you watch a bird you can't bring back into the house. She started a series called Tiny Tea's Quiet, reservation-only afternoon spreads in actual rented spaces with emergency exits and permits, and a little printed card that said "Shoo" in a friendly font. She never used my house in her photos again. Once, she posted a caption about learning the difference between content and community, and I did not roll my eyes. People can change when someone makes it clear where the edge is. For a while I worried my ending wouldn't be satisfying. I have read the comments on stories like this. I know what some people want. They want humiliation, public and permanent. They want the person who threw confetti in your hallway to trip on her own streamers and fall flat. Here is what I got instead: a binder full of receipts, a porch full of cardigans, a son who knocks, and a house where the loudest thing is soup simmering. It doesn't look triumphant in a thumbnail. It feels like sleep. Still, if you need a scene where something breaks, remember the moment the inspector said, "Ma'am, do you want these guests to leave?" And I said, "Yes." The break was the habit of swallowing my no. It made a sound you can't capture on video, but you will feel it when you do it. Evan asked one day if we could take new photos for the living room. Not the posed kind. Pictures of the pantry marks and the dent the old dog made on the baseboard and the ring of mist varnish where the ring light burned the piano, still there, faint, like a healed scar. We made a wall called The Things That Happened. We put a picture of Walter's half-finished birdhouse next to one of the completed birdhouse hanging, a reminder that not everything left unfinished is a failure. Some things get finished by a different pair of hands. Sometimes at night, I play the piano poorly. I choose hymns that don't mind being crooked. I press a single key and let the note hang like laundry. It stays until it settles into the wood. That persistence is the opposite of a party. If your daughter-in-law is using your house like a set, I can't send you inspectors in a box. I can tell you what Mr. Alvarez told me with his hand on my binder. Be patient together. Write things down when your heart is pounding so the page can remember when you want to forget. Ask for help. Quiet is communal. It's also contagious once you show people what it looks like. On the day the lilacs bloomed late and forgiven, Evan stood on the porch and said, "Do you want more noise in your life at some point?" He looked at Mira, who was laughing with Tasha about a fundraiser for the library. I looked at the planter boxes, the pencil marks, the fresh coat of oil on the piano, the key with new teeth on my chain. "Maybe," I said, "but I'll schedule it." We laughed. We drank tea that tasted like lemon and relief. And I slept that night like a woman who pressed play at the exact right time and heard a room listen. Months later, at another committee meeting, a young couple asked about hosting a pop-up soup night in their garage. We want to be good neighbors, the man said. I watched him hold his partner's hand like a person steadying a ladder. How do we do it right? You write it down, I said, sliding the one-page guide we'd made across the table. You ask before you assume. You finish by 9. You clean up what you spilled. You leave the house better than you found it. And if someone says no, I added, tapping the word that matters, you listen. They nodded as if I had handed them a recipe. In a way, I had. You might expect me to say that I forgive everything. I am not that neat. I am a woman with a binder and a porch whose boards touch each other without squeaking if you stand where Walter meant you to. Forgiveness is not required for sleep. Boundaries are. If forgiveness comes, it will show up like the mail on a sunny day, expected and ordinary, and still a little bit welcome. When the first snow came, barely a sift, I pulled the dawn binder out of the piano bench and flipped through it. The decibel chart looked like a heart that had learned to rest. The citation sat tucked behind a letter from the city that said thank you. I considered throwing the binder out and didn't. It will live under the bench until I decide otherwise. Patience also means not rushing to close the file on yourself. On an errand day in January, I passed the loft building where Brielle once wanted to move. In the lobby window, a flyer for tiny teas with a little line at the bottom that read, "Permit, yes." I stood there for a moment and felt something unstick in me, some petty hope that she had fallen and stayed down. She had not. She had adjusted. Maybe that is better. I went home and baked lemon bars. Evan and Mira arrived, cheeks pink from cold, and we ate them standing up, laughing when the powdered sugar clung to our sweaters in little constellations. At 9 p.m., I looked at the clock out of habit and then at the door. It was closed. It would not open and spill 20 strangers into my night. I washed the pan with both hands in hot water until it shone. Then I turned off the kitchen light and let the house grow dark in a way that felt chosen. Here is the last thing. On certain quiet nights when the heater ticks and the rain gives it small applause, I press a key on the piano and stretch a note into the room. It hangs there, lonely and right, and then it settles into the wood that knows me. I imagine the neon sign that once hung above the mantel, and I replace its script in my mind, not farewell to Fairview, but welcome home, Ruth. And I believe it.
My grandmother told me this story. Thanks for watching this video, like and subscribe. Bye bye!